Good day, learners. I'm Mr. Kosa XF, and I'll be taking you through the lesson of what? Of static electricity for natural science for your class of what? Of grade 8. Okay. Then let's look at our lesson objectives. By the end of this section, you as a student should be able to define what static electricity is, explain how friction causes what charges to move, demonstrate charging by what? By rubbing, and identify conductors and what an insulators as well as their what as their examples, and describe a real life example of what of static what electricity. Okay, if I may ask, what is static electricity? Okay, then static electricity is the build up of an electric charge on the surface of what of an object. It's a build up of what of an electric charge on the what on the surface of a what of an object. It happens when you rub two materials together, then causing what the electrons to move. It happens when you rub two materials together, causing what the electrons to move. Then the object gaining the electrons then becomes what becomes negatively charged, while the one that loses its electrons becomes what positively charged. Okay. Then if we look here at our diagram below or the picture above, let's look at our picture here. Then static, it says what? We are having two balloons and a what? And a wall. And two balloons and a wall. Then the balloons are having what? The positive charge and a positive charge. Then we know that like charges repel each other, while unlike charges or opposite charges attract what each other. That's why the negative charge and the positive charge of the what of the ball and the balloon attract what each other. Okay, we said static electricity is the buildup of an electric charge on the surface of a what of an object. It happens when you rub two objects together, then causing electrons to move. Okay, then the object gaining the electrons becomes what negatively charged, while the what while the object that loses its electrons becomes what positively charged. Okay, then how friction creates what? Static electricity. Friction is the rubbing of two materials together. Then when you are rubbing these two materials together, electrons move from one object to the other. Okay, then you got to charges stays on the what on the surface and do not flow. Okay, as I've said at the previous slide, that like charges repel each other while opposite charges does what attract each other. So how friction creates static electricity? We said that when friction is the rubbing of two materials together, then the electrons will flow from one from or will move from one object to the other, and stays where in the surface of the what or accumulate or build up in in the surface of the what of the object. And we have said that static electricity is the build-up of what? Of an electric charge in the what? In the surface of a what? Of an object and do not flow. So static electricity friction creates what? Electricity in that manner. Okay, then let's look at our example here. We're having what? We're having a rod and a dry cloth. Okay, then the rod is what it has the what the negative charge, and the dry cloth has the what has the positive charge. Okay, then when you rub the two materials together, then the rod becomes what positively charged, because it has what it has lost its what its electrons, and the dry cloth becomes what becomes then got negatively charged because it has gained the electrons from the what from the rod. Okay, then that's how friction creates what static electricity. Okay, then the demonstration, the balloon and the hair. Then first, wrap a balloon on your hair or a wool what cloth. Then bring it near small pieces of what of paper and observe what happens. Let's look at our diagram let's look at our diagram here. We're having a gentleman. The gentleman is busy rubbing the balloon against what? Against his head. Okay. As the gentleman rubs the balloon against his head, then the balloon gains what? Gains a negative charge. Then once you place the balloon next to the small pieces of paper, those neutral papers will jump towards the what? Towards the balloon. It's like rubbing a ruler in your what? Into the hair, then placing it next to small pieces of what? Of paper. Those small pieces of paper will jump towards the what? Towards the ruler, and that is what? That's static what? Electricity. Okay, then we're having what? Conductors and what? An insulator. Then a conductor allow the charges to move what? To move easily, and the insulators hold the charges in what? In place. Okay, then the example of conductors were having what? A copper, gold, then we go to all other metals, the graphite and what? And water. Okay, all these object or materials allows what? Allows the charges to move easily. And the examples of insulators were using glass, plastic, rubber, wood, fabric, wool, paper, and so on and so on. Then these materials or this object does not allow charges to move easily, but it does what? It holds the charges in what? In place. Okay, then those are the what? Are the examples of what? Of the conductors and the what? And the insulators. And also we said good, the difference between the conductor and the insulator is what? The conductor allows the charges to move easily, and the insulator hold the charges in what? In place. Okay. Okay. Everyday examples of what? Of static electricity. We have what? We have lightning. Lightning is a discharge of what? Of static in the what? In the clouds. Then lightning, it occurs when an imbalance of what? Of a positive and the negative charge then builds up in the what? In the storm what? Storm cloud. Okay, then lightning occurs when an imbalance of a positive and negative charge then will build up in the what? In the storm what? Storm cloud. Okay, then we have what? We have clothes sticking together. Clothes sticking together after what? After drying. Then is due to the what? Is due to the build up of an electric charge then caused by friction. Then friction between what? Between different fabrics in the what? In the dryer. Okay, is due to the what? Is due to the build up of an electric charge caused by friction between different what? Between different fabrics in the what? In the dryer. Then we have what? We have the small shocks after what? After walking on a carpet. Okay, then is due to the what? Is due to the build up of an electric charge. Then we go from the what? From the friction between the what? Between the shoes and the what? And the carpet. And then when you touch a conductor, like a what? Like a metal what? Door handle, then it causes what? It causes a brief what? Electric shock. Okay, when you touch what? A conductor like a metal what? A metal door handle, it causes what? A brief what? Electric shock. Okay, then paper cleaning, then we go to a ruler after rubbing, as I've demonstrated got the previous slide, where I took a ruler or a balloon, then you rub it against your hair, then those small pieces of paper will jump towards the what? Towards the ruler. Okay, then we use photocopies in our daily life, then especially those who are working at what? At offices. Okay, then photocopies uses what? Static to what? To transfer images. Photocopies uses what? Then static to transfer what? Images. Okay, then a quick recap what? Quiz, then you write today's date. Then one, what causes what? Static electricity. What causes static electricity? Two, what happens when you rub two materials together? Then three, what is the difference between what? Conductors and what? An insulator. Okay, and for your understanding, you can even include one example of each. Then number four, give one real life example of what? Of static electricity. Okay, then for your homework, then you could draw and label a diagram showing how wrapping a balloon on hair creates what? Static electricity, and include the arrows for what? For electron movement, and label what? The positive and the negative what? Charges. Okay, then go and do this homework. Then we will correct it when we meet on our what on our next class. Okay. Then for a quick recap or the recap of the what of the lesson, we said what friction transfer electrons between what between object, and friction is when you rub two objects together, then the electrons will move from one object to the other. Then it will move from one object to the other, and the object that gains the electron, the object that gains the electrons become what negatively charged, and the one that loses the electrons becomes what becomes positively charged. Okay, then static electricity, we said, is the build up of what of an electric charge in the surface of the what of an object. Okay, then we said what opposite charges then are going to attract each other, while like charges what repel each other. Then for the real life examples then of static electricity, we used what we used lightning, then shocks, and what clinging. Okay, then that was that for today's section. We will meet on the next one. Thank you.